how does Bitcoin help us break free of this domestication?
There are those explicit ways in which it changes our interaction with cyberspace, makes it provably costly to protect us from malicious control signals, like Lucas is mentioning, the types of attempts at social engineering. And there's also that electric cyber dome that helps protect our digital resources, our financial data, our health data. I think there's even a more grounded reason, though. It gives you, the protection is yours and your responsibility. You have to, not your keys, not your coins. You have to learn how to be sovereign with Bitcoin. You have to learn, okay, cybersecurity is now my responsibility. I can't outsource this to the software admin provider. What does it mean to do self-custody? What does it mean to have, cold storage, whatever types of, thing that you're considering of doing? It's now your responsibility. And so once you charge a person with their own responsibility for their own self-defense, you begin to push them back towards, the need to develop their autonomy and self-sovereignty.
You see this expressed so much in the lifestyle of Bitcoiners, is that you navigate the shitstorm that is fiat. You find your way out of that desert, and now you've found Bitcoin, and you're in this somewhat fugue state of realizing self-realization, becoming a self-actualized individual, where if I can control my own money, I can control my own body, I can control my own thoughts, I can control my own actions. I can take responsibility for my environment. You go to a Bitcoin event and what do you see? Happy, healthy people who are bettering themselves and proving that not only can people change, but that when you put people in a natural state of self-responsibility, they happily absorb that responsibility. They don't want to deflect it.
Right.
But when you don't have the tech, this goes back to what Lowry says. A, technology does not negotiate, but B, that like no change has ever been made until one engineer does something that shifts the power structure. And when that happens, then you liberate so much human freedom and affluence and joy.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing to see how Bitcoin does help us break free from that domesticated status. You see people. When I found Bitcoin, I put all my ties in a box that says "Do not open or break in case of wedding or funeral." Right? Like because that's what that had always been the signal of.
Yeah.
Right. And so.
Yeah, I saw a tweet from Russell O'Connor yesterday. He said he got rid of all his suits,
and now he wants one.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a whole
by choice.
By choice.
Yeah.
Right. He was throwing away these. Well, we talked about clothing yesterday as like symbolizing your position in the hierarchy. And when you're, it's a what is the term where they call a business executive a suit, right? There's like metonymy. It's not metaphor. It's metonymy. Maybe I might be mispronouncing it. Anyways, it's like he had suits because he was domesticated in his own fiat life philosophy, and then when he got into the Bitcoin life philosophy, he discards all of them. But now in his own freedom, he wants a suit. So yeah, it's like it sounds like a subtle difference, but I think it's actually really profound.
When it is a choice, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's profound.
You're deciding to happen to the world rather than let the world happen to you.
Yeah,
in a way,
yeah.
Right. And so this self-domestication or domestication loop, Bitcoin does change it, at least. If you just think about, the agricultural age is maybe the easiest example. It's like, okay, well, we shifted from hunters and gatherers to agrarians, but that made us very dependent on the rhythms of agrarian life, right? Like, you got to get to bed at a certain time, wake up at a certain time, repeat certain actions. Also, the diet changed, right? Like we talked about, people's their teeth rotting and physical stature becoming diminished, like because you've changed the proportion of meat in your diet to more grain. And so it's such a paradox in a way. You're trying to like liberate yourself and create more food and overcome the economic scarcity of nature, right? To have more economic abundance. But at the same, so you're trying to strive for like independence or freedom, but at the same time you gain this dependence, and that you now have to accord yourself with all the demands of agrarian lifestyle. And it's like, okay, well, that's fine. I mean, if you want to do that, great, but not everyone should have to do that, right? We really want people that are more like sovereign individuals that are choosing their own path, right? They can choose. I mean, I guess we're all domesticating ourselves in some way, right? It's more, I think if I take it all the way down to the physics level, it's entrainment, right? It's like whatever you're doing, you're becoming like.
Yeah.
Entrainment is where if you take the frequency of any system and you put it near another system, eventually they start to synchronize, basically. The vibration
They
of one
oscillate
system.
at the same frequency.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The classic example is the tuning fork.
Yep.
If they're on the same frequency or hertz or whatever the tuning fork measurement is, you hit one, the other one starts to vibrate, right? But it's also true in biology. You put women together and eventually their menstrual cycles start to harmonize. It's also in just interpersonal dynamics. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? Like we're all products of our environment. We're all, I mean, due to this physics concept, we are becoming like our surroundings. And so there's some subtle shift with Bitcoin where you go from being programmed to being self-programmed, right? Like you get to choose. Even us having this conversation right now, which is inspired by Bitcoin, it's like it's helping us have this realization that, oh, I get to choose who I spend time with, what books I read, what job I do, what activities I engage in, et cetera. I get to entrain myself and can program myself, basically. If you don't have that realization, you might just be meandering through life, right? Just doing whatever you can to survive, getting this job, getting that job, and then you are basically being programmed. So, all that is to say what? It's yeah, I guess how else could we say Bitcoin is changing this? It's people are going to have this tendency to imitate the wealth acquisition strategy that works. So the example I like to use here is, okay, Putin today, Vladimir Putin, you know, a notorious statesman, supposedly has like north of $200 billion net worth. He's acquired all of that wealth not by building anything of value for anyone. He's acquired it by coercing people. It was literally on top of a giant abstract power hierarchy that's not a competence hierarchy. It's a coercion hierarchy, right? It's literally funded through tax revenue, and taxation is theft. Okay, well, in a world of fiat currency and gold, the Vladimir Putin strategy seems to be very imitation worthy. You can get a $200 billion net worth by acting like this guy. But in a world that's running on Bitcoin, this wealth acquisition strategy does not work as well. We would expect to see more entrepreneurs having the people that have created products and services that are better, faster, cheaper, and improving people's lives. We would expect them to have the $200 billion net worth. And so this changes the propagation of mimetic patterns or imitation-worthy patterns. So you would see more people imitating these hypothetical future entrepreneurs than you would imitating statesmen, because statecraft is becoming less profitable over time. And so I think, yeah, basically in that world, people are going to imitate successful entrepreneurs rather than imitating statesmen. So that means we're going to be more peaceful, prosperous, more moral even. Like it's hard to understate there's some continuity between like material incentives, wealth acquisition, and then imitation. And Bitcoin is changing the material incentive layer, which then changes the way we acquire wealth. I always say it's either making or taking. Taking is now much more expensive or less profitable, to say it that way. Making is therefore the preferred strategy. So people get rich engaging in making. So what does that mean? People start imitating that, and you get a lot more entrepreneurs and a lot less statesmen.
Yeah, and it recenters us on an evolutionary track for the species as a whole that conduces to our systemic fitness. That's one of Lowry's underlying points, is when you have a hierarchy that domesticates everybody, you're not just subject to oppression from the people who exploit you at the top of the hierarchy, but also from some sort of existential risk, a comet that comes, changing weather patterns. But if we recenter ourselves to reward the entrepreneurs, as you say, instead of the status, instead of those who are parasitical in their wealth accumulation, then now as a whole, our species is once again on an evolutionary track to bootstrap us into the next Kardashev level, harness all the energy from the sun, perhaps, bootstrap new technologies as we search for new energy sources, types of things that could mitigate existential risk from whatever, a comet coming in, if we have new sources of power that'll enable new rockets to shoot at it or whatever. But that mimesis is very important for social animals. And so if we have correct incentives, they're going to incentivize our own evolution in the correct direction.
Yeah, we go from the 60s, which is a decade in which we set an impossible goal to make it to the moon and achieve it. And then 71, we go off the gold standard and we enter this fiat nightmare, which, because of the rewards, and you correctly state that these rewards, because, I want to acquire the same wealth as someone who's at the top of the game, so I need to mimic what they're doing. What they're doing is not ethical, so I therefore need to be not ethical.
Yes.
And it draws these minds. And I look at the 70s and 80s and 90s as what happened is that because of the rewards in finance, all of these brilliant physicists, mathematicians, statisticians went into finance instead of advancing.
Right.
Like we haven't advanced physics, right?
Yeah.
And Eric Weinstein will pound on this, right?
Yeah,
We
something
haven't
went off the
gone
track in the
anywhere.
early 70s. They never rooted in money, but yes, agreed completely.
Yeah, it's so we just we lost all these brilliant minds to financial derivatives and money changer schemes,
Right.
And proof of that, like the largest market in the world, the Forex market, which set like $7 trillion a day of nothing but extracting value,
Paper pushing.
nothing,
Non-productive.
And so when you have fiat money, you adopt a fiat mindset, which is fiat ethics, and then you fight fiat wars.
Yes.
And you have to continue to fight those fiat wars in order to justify the fiat money.
Yeah.
And it becomes the self-licking ice cream cone. It's self-serving. It's the gluttonous monster that can feed itself.
Yeah.
So,
No, that's wonderfully said, man. And that is the spiritual cancer that is fiat, right? And that's, you just summed it up really well. It's like what I've been trying to say on the show for so long. It's like you talk about money and people think, oh, you're talking about finance. It's like, no. It's like the interconnection of every layer of existence, right? Psychological, technological, geopolitical, and they're all swirling and interconnected with this money. And it's like, if you just poison the money, well, then you fuck everything. It's a blood disease on the global human organism, basically.
It rewards extraction, right? That's what finance is it's an extraction economy. It does not add.
Right.
It does not promote human abundance or affluence. It is nothing more than a legalized shitcoin casino, which is a taker's game.
Yeah.
And so, you end up continually promoting that. And we put on a pedestal and we praise the 2 or 3 that are at the top. And we don't consider all the, the huddled masses at the bottom that have just had their lifeblood and their energy sucked out of them.
Even this is super, the hyper successful entrepreneurs like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, they have a lot of their success is attributable to either circumventing state tax or regulation or getting contracts, right? Like in the case of Musk, well, Amazon was a good way to circumvent state sales tax for a long time. So they could undercut their competitors in the retail space for the first 10 or 15 years because the state hadn't caught up to how do you exact sales tax for online sales. It took a while. So therefore, Amazon had this advantage. In the case of Musk, the SpaceX gets giant government contracts, right? Tesla had all these subsidies for electric cars. So even our entrepreneurs that we celebrate, like they're kind of pseudo entrepreneurs in a way, right? They've got one foot in both worlds to some extent. And we all do, right? We all live in the paradigm of statism, but what would a pure entrepreneur look like, right? What would the guy subjected to no taxation and not deriving his revenues from theft or coercion, what would that look like? What would he or she be inventing?
Yeah.
That's what excites me about Bitcoin.
Yeah, because you make a really good point about a figure like Musk. By necessity, they have to become a semi-political figure. What, you wouldn't think to get man to Mars, a way stop on that journey is to buy Twitter, to have like a propaganda arm or whatever, to recenter politics, to enable hopefully competence to be used as a criterion, and to eliminate regulation. So, you just make a really good point that what would an entrepreneur look like, and the entrepreneurs that we have, what would they be doing if they didn't have to redirect energy into politics, essentially?
Absolutely. It's a dissipation of entrepreneurial energy. So you don't have to be engaged in the political process at all. And then you also have to presume he's even doing it for the right reasons. Like we think, Elon bought Twitter for freedom of speech. It's like, who knows what game he's playing, right? He could be, we don't know, basically.
It's a waste of talent.
Exactly.
You know the comedian Mitch Hedberg?
Yeah, of course.
So he talks about, so if you're a successful comedian, what do they always want you to do? They want you to have a show, right? It's like, you're funny, can you write? He's like, that's saying to a chef, you're a great chef, can you farm?
Yeah.
This is a waste of my talent.
Yes,
I should not be doing this. I've seen Elon on Twitter directly address that and note that their contracts are a very small portion but yes, they do need that stuff to get started. However, one of the things that I thought was hilarious is that, so Bezos used to be a citizen of Washington State, right?
Right.
Washington State passed this thing called a billionaire's tax, which they projected something like $4.2 billion worth of tax revenue from. And Bezos goes, I think I'll move to Florida. And that was half.
Yep.
And so, he is, I think, this is what a beautiful example of vote with your feet.
Absolutely.
And just get the hell out.
Yeah, and that is a vestige of the United States as a constitutional republic, that it had this decentralized structure for reasons like that.
Yep.
If this one state is mistreating you, well, then you got 49 other options.
Got a sandbox, man.
Yeah, we didn't have 49 to start, but other options basically. And so the founding fathers were trying to inculcate this free market kind of paradigm at the governmental level, which Bitcoin takes to another level, right? It's like pushing it to an extreme in a way. This all sounds well and good, but I think there's something to be said for the fear that comes with this, right? That there is, we can beat up on statism all day, and there's a number of reasons to do so, but there is a certain level of stability or predictability that a hierarchy offers, even if it's tyrannical.
Yeah.
Right. The biblical examples, like the Israelites, right? When they escape Egypt, Moses leads them into the desert and they're wandering for 40 years. Well, a lot of them wanted to go back, right? They're like, fuck, we're out here in the middle of nowhere and there's all this entropy and unknown. And, they encountered all kinds of issues. They were going through the process of entraining themselves to a new situation outside of the predictability or stability of a hierarchy. And that's a painful process by definition. And so the world we're describing, I think there is going to be a certain level of unpredictability or fear. It doesn't have to be fear. Definitely unpredictability that comes with moving from one paradigm to another. But the process of that is necessary, because like at the end of that, Moses, after 40 years, he's saying like, okay, here's what you guys have been doing. You've had all these conflicts. Here's how you have resolved them. Here they are now written down. So here are the rules basically to go and construct a new hierarchy. And so that is a process of becoming, what are you saying? Freedom comes with a process of becoming undomesticated. Right? Like the pain of becoming undomesticated even. And then you get to re-choose how you're going to domesticate yourself again in this new hierarchy. And so I think we're going to go through something similar with Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think I believe Lowry has this quote, if not as another thinker, that we are clay statues that are shaping ourselves, and that shaping is painful.
Oh, yeah.
And so in the process of not becoming domesticated, there is the anxiety of freedom. There is all the things that could happen to you in the wild, in the desert. And there are different psychological types. Some people are more risk averse. Some people measure risk in different ways. And, that's not a problem if you have Bitcoin as an alternative. If Bitcoin is the standard, some people will store their coins with a custodian on a centralized platform like Coinbase. Some people will have shares of an ETF. And there's a spectrum that you can do. And some people, may not be ready for a full jump into off the grid self-sovereignty or whatever. And so there's nothing inherently wrong with that. There's different types of people. And as long as there is that base level ability to exercise absolute sovereignty, then people can, based on the risk averseness and their psychological profile, kind of adapt to that.
Yeah. And again, this is kind of the beauty of it, is you could choose, even as a Bitcoiner, to opt in to one of these super advanced, rigid hierarchies, right? And you could just slot yourself in and play your role and have a lot of predictability. And, I've never been to Singapore, but I've heard it's a very strongly policed hierarchy, right? There's the streets are clean and all of that. It's like you could do that, or you can go into the wild, wild west, so to speak, wherever that may be. And it's more of this like choose your own adventure thing that seems really important versus forcing people into certain social roles or certain social hierarchies. Also recharacterizing the hierarchy based on competence rather than coercion. Obviously, that's very important. You want people doing what they're good at and not coercing one another. That's a good situation to live in, right?
Yeah.
You get to enjoy the fruits of everyone else's labor as they get to enjoy the fruits of your labor, and then preferably people aren't coercing one another, because that's good for peace and enjoyment.
Yeah.
So
this makes me think of, Jordan Peterson's 2017 Harvard lectures, he goes into the Oedipal mother. And the Oedipal mother is the woman who loves her infant so much that she resents them for becoming a toddler, a child, a preteen, a teen, and then an adult, right? And so therefore
the mother that can't let go.
Yes, that can't let go. And in talking about how to treat that, and so now what I'm doing is I'm projecting the Oedipal mother as the government, and the safe place. Oh, you can stay here. I'll feed you Cheetos. I'll make your bed. Don't worry about a thing. You'll always be near mommy. And he says, the risk is that if you leave here, you could lose your life, right? That risk is real. But the risk that occurs if you stay here is that you'll lose your soul.
Yeah.
And you should value your soul heavily, right? To not taint that. And if you never make a choice, you'll never know the truth. You just have to continue making these choices because they refine your ability to assess risk. And I told you yesterday, I saw this online that made me really think highly of all the failures that I had, which was that I have failed more times than you have tried. Right. And it puts into perspective, like, failure is not something to be ashamed of. Failure is feedback. It's a loop. We do better. We make better risk assessments after. Yeah.
That's excellent. It's again a callback to the sovereign individual, because they describe the state as the nanny nation state,
yes,
right? That infantilizes you. And this is what Bitcoin again enables the emergence of the sovereign individual. And I think the sovereign individual could be straightforwardly described in the context of what you just said as someone who values their soul more than their life.
There you go.
That's good.
All right, like they want to go out and live their life to the fullest, all risk included. I mean, maybe not accounted for, but they're just willing to take the risk or the entropy of freedom to live life to the fullest. And I don't think there's any other way, right? You can't have both.
Yeah. In any conflict, the winner is always the one that's willing to die.
Yeah.
Right. So if you value your soul more than your life, then you'll win everything.
Right.
Just whatever you set your mind to, whatever you push towards, the fear that you have of staying the same, if it's greater than the fear of the pain of changing, then you'll make that move. Yeah. And you'll make that choice. You'll make that jump. You'll exit the matrix. You'll start pumping some iron and walking around, getting some sunlight, and then you'll become a self-actualized individual.
Exactly. That's a great point. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money. And be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.